everybody, it's Jama Malmy, and today I have a fun challenge. So I participated in a game show called Craft Roulette, and it is hosted by Mary Gunn on her Mary Gunn Fun Facebook page. And so she randomly chooses with a wheel what we are going to have to include in our project for the night. So I was a guest on her show, and we had to make 2 random cards. We had to use blues or cool colors, include a wreath, and use pencils. And so I only got one project done on the Facebook Live, but this is how it turned out. I thought it turned out really cute, and for those of you who know my style, it is not simple and it is not something I can create 2 cards in about 45 minutes. So I didn't finish the second card, and that's what I'm going to do here today. But here is my kind of wreath background here, and I colored in some of those leaves with pencils. I did a shaker card because when I heard wreath, I went to circle and thought shaker card, and I love making shaker cards. I've got mostly cool colors with the exception of a little pop of pink and yellow. And so this was my first of 2 cards. So for my second card, I pulled out the Wreath Essentials stamp and die set. So I'm going to be using those, and I thought that I would pull out some Distress Oxide inks, do some blending, and we'll see if the idea I have in my head actually works out. So let's go ahead and get started, and I hope you enjoy. I started out by using my ink blending tool and blending the Distress Oxide ink onto my white daisy cardstock. I wasn't quite sure exactly where I was going, so I started out by covering the entire piece of paper and then ended up changing my mind. But the second color, I overlapped the first color a little bit, then went back to the first color and overlapped over the second color a little bit, and that helps it blend even better. So every time you're blending 2 colors together, you want to go back to the color next to it and then blend again with the other color next to it, if that makes sense, and create a nice blend in between each color. I could have blended a little bit better between the first 2 colors, but that's okay. Now the beauty of Distress Oxide ink is that it reacts with water, and that includes the Close to My Heart shimmer brushes. So I splattered some of that shimmer brush water onto my card, and it reacted with the Distress Oxide ink and also left a nice shimmer. Now I was thinking I might want to use a little bit brighter blue, and so I pulled out this other color. I think that was Salty Ocean, I'm not quite sure. And it was just too bright, so I didn't even continue with that. And then I thought that I would pull out some embossing powders and start embossing. Now, I made sure that the Distress Oxide ink that I blended on was nice and dry, because since it is a dye and pigment hybrid ink, it takes a little bit longer to dry than just a regular dye ink. So I made sure it was really dry, and then I used my anti-static tool to cover on top of that, and then I did the Versamark ink and embossing powder. It still stuck a little bit, so I just used a dry paintbrush to get those extra flyaways off. And then I didn't add enough of that shimmer brush at the bottom end of there, so I'm just adding a little bit more, and then I will wipe it up again. So now I have a nice embossed wreath onto my background. And so then I lined up my die. It took a little while of spinning it around and making sure that I had it lined up properly, but then I cut out my die, and I have this really fun background on my wreath. Now, another cool thing that you can do with Distress Oxide inks is smooshing your background right onto the ink and using them to splatter, just like I did with the shimmer brush. And they also can be used as like watercolors too. You could use your paintbrush and color like a watercolor right onto your background too. I decided I wanted splatters, and as I was adding the splatters, I just was really not liking it as a background. It was too busy, too much going on, and I just really didn't like it. And so since I had all of those colors already down, I decided to smush my background right onto those inks. And look at how cool it's starting to look. One of the really cool things about Distress Oxides, I keep saying one of the really cool things, there's so many cool things about Distress Oxides, but another cool thing is that you can just keep layering the color on, and it's not going to mix with the other colors. Once it's dry, if you add more wet ink on top of it, it's not going to muddy up if it typically would muddy up with watercolors. So I just keep smushing the ink onto my all-purpose mat, add a little bit of water, that's what's in a little dropper that I keep on my desk, and then smushing it on. Now this last one right here, I didn't add as much water as the other ones, so it ended up darker, but that's okay. It's going to end up looking good. I'm going to smush another color, add a little bit more water, and go right over it, and it's going to just all blend together and look nice. The more you layer the Distress Oxides on a background, it's just the better it looks. Like you think it looks terrible at first, just keep going. It's kind of like watercolors. You think it looks terrible at first, but once it dries, it looks awesome. With the Distress Oxides, the more you layer on, the better it's going to look. So since I ended up covering my whole background and I hadn't intended that, I didn't, at this point is when I decided to make 2 cards, because I didn't want that die cut that has the same color background on it on the background. It would just be dark on dark. It wasn't enough contrast. So then on this background that I created, I wanted to have a very simple sort of white background wreath. So I just stamped it in the chipped sapphire, which is the navy color distress ink. You can use the distress ink to actually stamp as well. And then I colored it with some colored pencils. These happen to be watercolor pencils, but I didn't blend them with water. I just used them as regular pencils. Then I was getting kind of stumped on what to do with it, and I pulled out my card sketchbook from close to my heart, and it helped me with some layout ideas for my cards. So I'm treating the wreaths as a circle in those layouts, and I found one layout that I really liked, and I pulled out the Every Little Thing paper pack, which has these similar dark blues and purples and aquas in it, and decided to pair this cute wreath with that paper pack. And then just following the sketch, I'm creating a few banners on there. To the left of the wreath, used some silver foil paper to add some extra shimmer, and that card is starting to come together. I wanted to add a few splatters, not as much as I did in that first background and how that started out, but I just wanted to have a few little splatters. So I used my clear shimmer brush to do the splatters. Number one, when I pick up that navy color, it will splatter it in navy and add some shimmer because it is the clear shimmer brush. And number two, since the shimmer brush has a small brush tip, it will give me small splatters, and that's what I wanted. The smaller the tip of your brush, the smaller the splatter will be. And vice versa, if you have a bigger brush, your splatters are going to be bigger. So I just added the splatters in the corners and finished gluing everything down. I popped up that wreath onto foam tape and set that in place. Now it just needs a sentiment and a little bit of bling. So I pulled out this older Christmas set, and I liked the Celebrate the Season sentiment on it. So I thought I'd put that going right across the wreath. So I stamped it in a black ink and cut that out with a dovetail. And I like how that ended up turning out. By the way, you can catch the live version of the Facebook Live for this game show on Fridays at 6:30 Central, 6:30 p.m. Central. It's on Married Gun Fun's Facebook page, and it's really fun. It's about an hour, and you can play along. So these ones I did after the fact, but that first card I did live, and it was really nerve-wracking, but it was really fun and a good exercise in creativity to create on the fly and create on the spot and use up our stash that we have, right? It was fun to pull out these older papers and this older stamp set and die, and it's so fun to work with new products as well. Don't get me wrong, I love the new products. I purchased the new products, but we don't want to just collect things, we want to use them. So it's fun to have a theme and have to use a wreath, and pulled out the wreath things that I had and used those. And so I hope that you'll play along too. So on to card 2, I kept it very simple. I cut it down, and I'm just mounting it onto some fun foam and adhering it to my card base so that there is a white border around it. Mounting it onto the fun foam helps it to not warp so much. It did warp just a little bit because of the watercoloring with the Distress Oxides. Just wanted to add a few little banners on here, and I stamped the warm winter wishes on the inside. Since these are not necessarily Christmas cards, I made them more winter cards and had a winter greeting on them, and they can be Christmas cards or just winter cards. So I didn't add any bling on that. I just left that as is. I know that's so unlike me, but here's a close-up of those. And isn't that ink blending so fun? I really think that the Distress Oxide backgrounds are the star of those cards. Thanks so much for stopping by today, and I hope that you enjoyed watching me make these cards and picked up some tips on using Distress Oxide inks. If you did enjoy, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and be sure to hit that notification bell next to the subscribe button to be sure you don't miss any upcoming videos. If you're interested in any of the available supplies I used, I've linked them below. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.